Hey everyone, it's Jeff. As we continue along on our podcast, Lora and I would love to touch on some topics that are near and dear to your hearts. So, if you have anything that you want to hear us talk about, if you want to get Laura's unique perspective on some of the things that you might be dealing with or some things that your loved ones might be dealing with, we would love to hear about those things. Please send us an email. mail.sowhatwhocares@gmail.com is the best way to do that. Or you can send us something on social media through our DMs or a comment or something like that. But we'd love to hear from you. It's important to us to make sure that we are touching on the things that are important to you. Please, again, reach out to us. And while you're there, subscribe, like, and comment. Okay, enjoy the episode. The traveler was halfway through tying a line when it happened. One of those almost invisible moments. The edge of a plank caught his bare toe. Sharp, sudden, not serious, but enough to make him curse and grip the side of the boat for balance. Reflex kicked in. Tension, frustration, the old impulse to barrel forward, fix it fast, move on. But something different happened this time. They stayed still. Not dramatically, not in some enlightened posture, just still. One foot grounded on the sun-warmed wood, the other gently throbbing. A breath in through the nose, then back out. The slap of waves, the creak of rope, a faint scent of salt. The pain wasn't gone, the problem wasn't fixed, but in that breath, that tiny, unceremonious pause, he remembered. There's power in catching yourself, even here on a splintered raft in the middle of an ordinary day. This is So What Who Cares, with Laura McCarville and me, Jeff Kolaski. Join us as we explore practical insights for an impractical mind. So this is the first episode of So What Who Cares that we've arrived with zero preparation
Yep.
for the most part. No notes. You'll notice I don't have my handy dandy tablet. It's over in that chair. And that's just because we decided we're still going to do this even though we didn't do any prep, or we may have prepped, but we didn't like put any notes together or anything like
Yeah,
that.
we didn't
So,
collab before
no,
it.
no. So we're just going to see how this goes. It'll probably be our best episode. So maybe. Our last ones were pretty good.
Yeah, I've enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Our topic today that we decided we wanted to get into was informal mindfulness practices, correct? Or just
Yeah.
or mindfulness informally?
Yeah, I think informal mindfulness practices. I think and I don't know, everyone has a different way of teaching all the things.
Mm-hmm.
I guess why I kind of use that language is because I teach in a lot of environments that need an um approachable language and approachable things that we can do to get there, to get to this place of pause um, before we respond. And there are informal practices or little things we can do that create that access point.
Okay.
Okay.
And if there's informal, there's also formal practices,
Right. Yes.
which we're going to get into later.
That's right.
But without going into too much detail, can you tell us a little bit like how the difference between an informal mindfulness
hmm
technique or practice or tool as opposed to a formal one?
Yeah. So we've covered a few, like pause before you pick up a phone or before you walk into the house. There's this sense of pause. We've talked about breath as accessing a breath. We've talked about anchors in the way of images or visualizations. If I think about a place in nature, um, what we're doing is just lots of little things that we've kind of peppered in through this podcast. And when I'm teaching people in a group setting or in like this way, what I want there to be is an access or a place to get in.
Mm.
And it doesn't have to be complex. It doesn't have to be time consuming. When I first started practicing meditation, I thought I had to have all the things
Hmm.
and have the room and the corner and the table and the cushions and then all the
It's a pretty
entire.
common misconception, I think.
Yeah, I mean
Yeah.
the whole thing is, well, I can't do that because I don't have the cushions.
Hmm.
But then I would be like, oh, well, there they are in the corner, but I need to have three, for me. And and I kept putting off
Mm.
doing the thing. And pretty soon I started to see, oh yeah, that's just what we do. When it's kind of pitched to us in this way in which it has, which is very complex and it's going to require a lot of time and you got to have a timer and maybe it should be a certain timer and you need to have uh,
Am I doing it right?
right.
Yeah.
And then and especially because it's being given to us in the way of not community
Mm.
settings, it's being pitched to us and it is a positive thing.
Mhm.
Mindfulness is can be. And but it's anything in isolation, you kind of work around your own preferences and
Yeah,
things like.
yeah.
So what was happening is I was still on the couch looking over at that corner. I mean, I'd moved a dining room table. I
I'm
had
making my
yeah,
meditation
I'm
zone.
gonna
Yeah.
create a whole space, and people will
Right.
say that I made a whole room. So it's not uncommon. It wasn't like just a
Mhm.
me thing.
Right.
But what I wasn't doing was tapping into this thing that I was teaching was is like presence,
Mm.
present moments, and how do I access this present moment in a compassionate way? And what are some entrance points? So that's what I wanted to do today. Is like just
Yeah.
give us some things
So we'll get into some of the more formal ways, but right
next
now,
time.
yeah,
Yeah.
but now, how do we? What do those look like?
So very simple. So this is an acronym that works really well, and it's BOLD, B.O.L.D.
Hmm.
So breathe, observe, listen, decide. Um, and when you're learning this, again, given what we've talked about around breath, I
Old,
bold.
but but if there's no breath, it's just old.
Well, if
That's
there's
how
no
I
breath, you're
feel.
just dead. So, I mean, I'm just saying, like,
Yeah.
take a breath,
Yeah.
take a beat, observe what's going around you. So that looks like in this moment, naming what I see.
Hmm.
Mhm. Then listen. And what is the listening part? And we sort of talked about this in this teaching. It's listen to your values. So that would take us into maybe another show where we get to talk about, well, what are values? What are your values? And we've talked about that in therapy for you
Hmm.
and this understanding of like value aligned action. Is
Right.
that how
Yeah.
you're,
Values consistent. That's
yeah,
how.
values
Yeah.
consistent. And sometimes we're not even aware of what our values
Right.
are. And um, honesty, if it's communal care. So we listen to our values and then we make a decision. And the reason why this is taught is because most people can look back and say, oh, I remember the moment I made the decision that wasn't aligned
Mm.
with my values that gave me this consequence. But I didn't have like the awareness of values. I didn't have awareness of that pause
Hmm.
that gave me the place to choose how to respond. Okay,
Okay.
so
Yeah.
if we say, you're in a situation and you get an email and this email just flips your lid
Yeah.
and you go right into responding in this email.
Hmm.
There wasn't that place of like taking a beat, breathe, observe, which if I am observing what's around me, that's bringing me to right here. Listen to what your values are. So if it's, communal care, um, I don't know. Do you have like a value that you tend to move to?
Mm.
Honesty,
Yeah. Uh,
trust building. What are some other values that come to mind for you? And you can Google it and, like, pull up a giant
Yeah,
list.
that I think that's where I'm struggling right now is just the language. I don't know that I've ever been asked to list out like my values. Um, but the magic of post production is I can cut out any thinking that I do. So if I
Oh, good.
if I want to, um, I think integrity is
Mm,
one that means a lot to me, and definitely meeting people where they are,
mm,
and some empathy
mhm.
and
Justice is another
yeah,
one.
yeah.
Mm. Yeah, so if I'm teaching a class or working one-on-one,
Hmm.
sometimes I pull out the piece of paper that says, "Here's the list of values,"
I could see that being helpful.
and
Yeah.
then they can go through, and I do this with kids and adults. What
Mhm.
works for kids works for adults.
Yeah.
It's across. So you
Yep.
can go maybe different words, right?
Mhm.
But you go through and circle like these are the things that are really with me right now.
Mhm.
And then you decide how to act in accordance with that. Now, you would think, oh, that would just be a natural thing. I'll just
Mm-mm.
naturally act in accordance with my values. But we don't
We
because we
don't.
have that survival brain. And we can, even if we're not a full flip of our lid, that
Right.
survival brain and our conditioning
Right.
can get us to respond in a way that isn't aligned with how we want to
Right.
respond.
How often do we or people that we know that we hear after an event or a thing or a moment, do we hear them or do we say ourselves, I wish I hadn't done that. I wish I hadn't
Hmm.
responded that way. I wish that
Hmm.
that feels gross now that I'm thinking back on it or whatever.
Yeah,
It just
it's super
it
simple, misaligned.
yeah.
Yeah.
I That's not who I am,
Oh,
like
right.
that's something that I've said and that I've heard people say, you
Mhm.
know, like I'm not that person.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
that's and very shameful feeling
Yeah.
when you're not. Yeah. How do you respond when that's the case? Like how do you coach to be able to be there? Because all right,
Mm.
so if I breathe, observe,
Listen.
listen,
Listen.
and then decide. So I breathe and I observe. I know I take a moment and something else takes over like anger
Mhm.
or whatever. And maybe it's not even like quote unquote righteous anger where, maybe that ain't because we've talked before.
Yeah, different kinds of
Anger
anger.
can be aligned with your values
Yeah,
depending on
yeah,
the
yeah.
situation. But let's say that's not in
Mhm.
alignment, but I'm still reacting with anger. It's still how I did it. How do you coach
Okay,
that?
so
Like
that's
what's
a
the
little bit different than this is why the informal practice is
Mhm.
so great because it gives us insight and starts to train the muscles of compassion
Mhm.
as like, oh wow. So instead of being like the shame, the hot potato of shame that we pass around, uh, we've learned then to go like, whew, whoa, I'm sorry. And I will practice forgiveness of myself and be gentle with some of that as I learn
Mhm.
how to do better. So there's maybe some compassion that's been
Right.
put in or some kindness in our informal practices as well as our formal practices. So if we don't respond in a mindful way or a way that's aligned, then we have something built in. So,
Mhm.
how do I work with people who come in and say, well, I really wish I had done it different? Well,
Mhm.
that's a whole different conversation, right?
Right.
Um,
Are you getting into like you remember when we talked about like fight or flight survival mode? Like the comments were made or the lessons that were given are to a certain extent you have no control over those.
okay, so also the subconscious mind,
Mhm.
right? So, if your conscious mind is saying, I want to feel, um, eh, I'm trying not to use examples of these beautiful people I get to sit with, and I should turn to myself and use okay, I've got one. This is me. I had a very subconscious belief that I'm loved because of what I do
Mm.
and of what I do is how I'm loved because I do the chicken chores, because I make all the meals, because I was going to all the grocery stores. Like that's why I was so loved.
Mm.
Um something I didn't know that's on a conscious level,
Mhm.
that's what I was doing. And the more I do, the less they have to do, and the more they'll love me, and then I'm getting the accolades, which I really do appreciate,
Hmm.
and then so it perpetuated. But when things kind of fall apart as things do, and you get a chance, or you go into someone who's like, maybe there's something else here,
Hmm.
I was like, I really had to get with myself of like, oh, how about I'm not loved because I do all those things, and I can share instead
Hmm.
those chores and that life stuff with the people I love, my family.
Right.
Um, or I'm so loved. I had a lot of subconscious under the
Hmm.
water stories going on.
Yeah.
And I still do. That's a forever thing.
Yeah.
But it doesn't even have to be like the flipping of the lid, fight,
Right.
flight. It has to do with like, here, I know, consciously, I know I don't have to do everything.
Right.
But on the subconscious, I'm still
I'm still feeling like a burden. I'm
unwinding.
still,
Yeah,
yeah.
still unwinding those things.
Right.
So it doesn't have to be a fight, flight reason
No.
we respond, or trigger hair response. And I
Hmm.
try not to use gun language, but that fast response, it can also be subconscious thinking and programming, which is really driving the bus a lot of times.
Right.
Um, so with that being said, how I work with that is the reason why we teach mindfulness or somatics or do these things is so we have insight to ourselves
Mm.
and can make more, or do more action. We can take
Hmm.
action in a way that's in right relationship with what we want to get done. And
Right.
it's good to do. Um, so what that means is then, let's say something subconscious comes to light, then I have to actually effort not doing some things,
Hmm.
and it feels really uncomfortable. Here we are back at informal mindfulness. Wiggle
Hmm.
your toes. Remember, you're not loved because you do the chicken chores.
The chicken chores.
I know.
Mhm.
And there's been times where Nathan, my beloved, has said to me and has worked with me and said, I don't love you because you do the chicken chores,
Yeah.
but thank you for doing them
Yeah. Yeah.
tonight.
I'm still
I really
grateful.
appreciate that
Yeah.
you're doing them, but it's not why I love you.
Right.
And so he's supported some of that, of course,
Hmm.
and as I've done for him. But that is so. What are informal practices? In the moment, wiggle my toes.
Mm.
In the moment, take a breath. Oh, what's here now? Oh gosh. Okay.
It feels like a big part of what we've come back to often is the O in bold, just the observational part. Is that because a lot of, I don't know, explanation can be, or interpretation can be had when you're observing those things in
I mean,
yourself?
that's the whole practice,
Yeah.
is to become the observer.
Right.
That doesn't mean you're not participating in life.
Yeah.
It means you remember the shades,
Yeah.
the sunglasses are
Yeah.
tinted yellow, and everything I see is yellow, and I take off the sunglasses and I see differently.
Mhm.
Becoming the observer means, taking off the tinted glasses and
Mhm.
seeing it instead of being in it.
Right.
And so finding that seat of awareness, the pause gives you a moment to go like, "Oh, this is what's happening now."
Right.
I'm not in the thing, I can see or witness the thing.
It's interesting because it is easier often, not maybe not all the time, but it is easier to, the common example is I can give my friends relationship advice, but I'm awful at taking it, or I don't see it in myself or something like
Oh,
that,
yeah,
you
blind
know,
spots.
right? And that's just an example,
Sure.
like not necessarily relationship advice, but it's easy to coach someone off the ledge, but it's not uh, proverbial. Um,
Mhm.
and it's not as easy to see those things in myself. But when you can step outside and actually look at yourself, is it then easier to notice those things? And I mean, the answer is yes, because of course it is. But I feel like there also has to be a certain level of objectivity.
Well, and we can never be objective because the
Right.
subconscious mind does not want you to know.
Right.
Like its whole job is to keep you from, that's the shadow. which we have on our,
which we'll get to.
is in
Yeah.
our plans to share. But that's the thing. This is why these practices in isolation are just not as juicy. And
Right.
and we can do a lot
But you
with
have to
that.
have something to keep some or someone, a
Friends,
community,
relationships, community, connection, teachers,
right?
guides, spiritual teachers.
That you respect and that you're willing to allow into that space and to see and to help you notice things in a loving and compassionate way. And sometimes it's a harsh, not harsh, but like a more tough way that
Depending on the relationship, of
sure.
course. Why we're practicing informally or finding little moments of pause and be in the present moment with some sweetness or kindness with
Mhm.
yourself, with, okay, here I am now. This is here too. I'm really feeling overwhelmed. And I'm just going to be aware of what that feels like, maybe in my body, if that's there, maybe in the way of how it's building. Okay, I'm going to feel myself swallow. Okay, here I am. Now let me go into the house or
Mm,
let me go to the next thing. And it's just creating these little pauses so that we're not reacting. We have a
mhm,
moment to respond. Um, you had mentioned work, and when you had mentioned work, I remember I was teaching down at Midtown, and there's a company there, a really big company, and they were having some of their employees come in, and they were coming in, and then they were quitting their jobs.
mhm,
So the CEO came in, and said, how's it going? Our people are coming in. I
mhm.
said, yeah, I have like 100%, success rate. And everyone who comes in quits working for you.
Yeah.
Like, because what was happening is that pause was like, whoa, how do I feel? I feel good. So for 1 hour, I feel good. And the 7 hours, I don't.
Mhm.
I don't think this is a match.
Right.
And there was no like, I need to blow it up. And maybe they did. I don't know. They never heard how but they would often come straight from leaving that. Like, I quit my job and come into the studio to
Mhm,
ground down, to feel their feet, to take a
mhm,
break, to pause. I worked with a lot of, young people doing their residency and med school and would
mm,
come I gotta just take a beat
mm.
and then go back out to this world that I'm in and
Craziness.
and decide how I want to engage and spend
Mhm,
my time. Um, and so the informal you don't have to sit on the cushion forever or for many hours or move to a cave or even get rid of your dining room table.
mm,
You can start to access that seed of awareness, that the
mhm.
observer, and go, oh wait, okay, here I am. Okay, here we go.
Yeah.
Now I can be with something else. Now, if it's something where it's getting bigger and bigger and it's like,
Mm,
whoa, overwhelm is here. Every time I take a pause, overwhelm's here. Okay, well, let's take, if you want, go a little bit deeper and go find someone to do some inquiry work with. Go find communal friends who you can trust that would be honest with you.
mhm,
Um and maybe do something a little deep diving on that. And there are maybe even formal practices that really would support that place of observer when having a really hard emotion,
mhm.
feeling, or sensation. And maybe there's some subconscious stuff to do too, right?
Right.
And why are we doing these things? So that we can access not just the present moment, but cultivating this place of heart wisdom, of heart centered living, so that in those moments we are creating the world we want to live in.
Mhm.
And that looks like, well, how am I doing that in my home? There was a time when I was teaching yoga, and this was maybe 20 years ago, and I was just pouring everything into my classes,
Yeah.
as you do when you're learning something new too. But I noticed that in that hour, my students got the best version of me.
Mm,
And then at home, my kids were little at that time, um, and their dad, and then husband, no, they weren't getting the best version of me. the most joyful, excited self.
I feel like that's a topic we could spend whole episodes on.
Yeah.
Not yours specifically, but that concept, that reality
Oh,
for so many people.
yeah. It actually is something that I work with a lot of people on
Mm.
because they're giving everything to their job, and then coming home, it's that thing.
Especially if it's a job like what you were speaking of, where there is passion in you for the
Oh,
thing you're
yeah.
doing.
I mean, I
It's
love
not it
teaching. I love
Yeah.
teaching.
It's not just
And I
I'm
do
giving it
feel
all to my
alive.
yeah.
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 But then it's like, well, what is happening in what I have access to, which is me? What is happening in me that I'm then coding and thinking that it's only in that hour that I
Right.
get to like bring forth joy?
Mhm.
Like, oh, I gotta make it so like, it was just, and it wasn't a big deal. I wasn't like I wasn't being I was an incredible mom. I was
Mhm.
present, but it was that place of joy,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
how I was accessing it, and that seed of awareness that the informal practices were giving me of the pause of like, whoa, observe, right?
I did have a quick question about the L in bold, the listen portion.
Mm-hmm.
When you say that, are you saying listen to your internal self, or are you listening to what's going on around you? Is it a
Just
combination of
like
all of
listen to
that?
your values. So if my value is,
Right, that's right.
yeah, listen to the values, but it's a good thing to, if you, if we were to listen to what maybe our training of knee jerk reaction
Mhm.
is, it may not be aligned
Right.
with the values. So it's listen to, and I could say listen to your gut, but I don't say that because so many times our gut
Yes.
is misinformed by our subconscious and our history.
And
And
like you just said, that could be easily confused with, well, if my quote unquote gut reaction was anger and outburst or something like that, but that's not values wise who I want to be and who I feel is appropriate and who,
mm-hmm,
and but if I but Laura said listen to your gut, and that's,
right. So
let's be real clear about that, right?
yeah,
Like,
right.
hmm,
It's,
that's interesting.
yeah, there's some, so it helps to like do the inquiry of like what is it that, and those values do ebb and flow and shift a little
Sure.
bit.
Yeah.
Um but that it does make a difference in like, maybe here. Now,
I'm listening, but who's talking right now, or what's
yeah,
talking
like
right
is
now? Yeah.
yeah. That's where the observer is so cool. Like
Mm.
that oh, you said I hear a lot of times you say
Yeah.
oh, because it's the oh that's the thing of like, imagine you're sitting behind a waterfall watching it all go,
Mm-hmm.
and most of the time we're in the waterfall running. There's sadness,
Mm-hmm.
there's anger, there's that,
Yeah.
here's the story. I do a lot, I think, but there's that thread
Yeah.
of thinking, and oh, I'm doing that thing again.
Mm.
I'm gonna sit back behind the waterfall and
Right.
watch that this thought
Mhm.
pattern float on.
No one clapped, nothing changed, except he noticed. And that's how everything changes.